this morning is our last session, and I want to talk about a topic that is kind of out of place. You know, we're talking about the gospel city and movement, and when you come to a conference like this, we're always thinking, what more can I do? How do I get more accomplished? And you're thinking about your ministry. Today, I'm going to talk about rest. This whole idea of Sabbath. This is probably one of the most significant revelations in my own life. And I don't know how many of you came to this conference feeling rested. Anybody? Sam is rested. Okay. How many of you leave today from this place feeling rested? Not a lot of hands go up, right? Back in 2020, I was ministering to all of our IWs in China. There were about 50 families, 50 units that came out of China, and we were gathering in Thailand, and I was supposed to minister to the group of our IWs. The first night, actually, I was supposed to talk about rest, and I got up on the stage, and then all of a sudden, my tongue froze. And I had this kind of blurry tunnel vision, and I just literally forgot everything that I was supposed to say. And for the next 20 minutes, I had to fight for every single word. And I don't know how I managed to finish that talk, but I came down from that stage. And that night, I couldn't fall asleep. I was wrestling, and I had the enemy literally just taunting at me that you're a fluke. You're not supposed to be here. So I thought it was just a spiritual warfare going on, and I remember sending out, wherever I go, I always have a group of intercessors praying for us. And my wife and I sent out an email, and people were praying. So I managed to we had a wonderful week with our IWs. But if you remember, that was also when all of our IWs were coming out of China because of the COVID. So I came back from that trip, and I thought that was just the land of the spirit of the land and spiritual attack that I experienced. But that just kept going on. And, you know, as a pastor, I began to have stage fright. Can you imagine getting on the stage and you get nervous and start having stage fright? My resting heartbeat, we all have these Apple Watch or smartwatch, but my watch used to actually beep and tell me that your resting heartbeat is too high. It was like 120, 130 beats per minute, even when I'm just standing or sitting and doing nothing. And that went on for a long time. So I went to see a doctor, and he said, there's nothing wrong with your body. Physically, you're okay. What I did not realize is that I was having an anxiety attack, panic attack. Now, just to give you a little bit of background, I have never known anxiety in my whole life. And this is the first time, and it was scary. That I had no control over my feeling, my emotion, and like all of a sudden, the surge of anxiety will just rise up, and I would not know what to do. And then I would have a hard time breathing, and I would have panic. Anyone here has experienced that? There's some of you who have experienced that. I began to have a whole new level of compassion and empathy towards those people who struggle with anxiety and depression. And so this was really going on for a long time. And when I came home, I did not realize that my daughter was also going through a significant crisis, mental health crisis at the time. Calvin was there, actually. You remember the Deeper Life conference we had? My daughter was just coming out of suicidal depression. And there are days that I thought that we were going to lose her. And I had no idea. From the outside, our family was a picture-perfect pastoral family with 4 kids. And yet, things were just falling apart. And I remember when I came back, we had our Deeper Life conference. Calvin was our speaker. And right out of that week, remember what happened? Shelter in place. I remember on March 9th, I wrote in my journal, I had significant speaking engagements, ministry opportunities, all scheduled. And I remember telling my wife that, honey, I have nothing to give. It's not, I mean, I can probably dig up my old message and preach something, but I remember telling her that I feel like I have no authority. I'm in no place to speak to another human being about God, about ministry. And I just was crumbling inside. And then shelter in place came. And to me and to my family to this day, it was a divine gift. It just really took me on this new journey of being restored, finding out what this Sabbath rest actually means. And I had to really learn to reorder my life. It was, so if you think about like, what is COVID, right? We have forgotten what it was like. I mean, it was pretty intense going into COVID, but for us, God gave us time to sit together as a family. We canceled all our ministry commitments, and for the next 3 years, our county was the first one to close down and the last one to open up. So for 3 years, we couldn't actually gather. So for me, like getting up on Sunday in pajamas and watching myself preaching online or Douglas preaching, that was a real gift. And every day we would take walks, and it really restored our family. And in that season, this is really the message that the Lord gave to me. And this is something that I had to learn. And to this day, I'm learning how to practice this. And that is really this gift that we call Sabbath. Most of our understanding of Sabbath, we're going to read a passage in Hebrews chapter 4. Most of our understanding of the Sabbath rest actually comes from the Old Testament, right? So we observe it, we practice it, but we're going to have sort of a new angle or a new understanding of what this Sabbath actually means for us. And I have a passage from Hebrews chapter 4. We're going to go to, I might need a help here. I'm going to give you a little bit of time to reflect on this passage. It's up. So if you have your own Bible or your own app, you can go to Hebrews chapter 4, but from verse 1 through 11, I'm going to give you about 5 minutes. And as you read through this passage, what are some things that are kind of standing out to you that kind of contradict your common understanding of the Sabbath? How we have understood as Christians. So what are some things that are strange, that are contradictory, or something that stands out? So I'm going to give you about 5 minutes for you to just read through the passage. If you have a highlighter, you can just mark it, you can write it down, and I would love to hear what you discover from this passage. So Hebrews chapter 4, verse 1 through 11. I'm going to ask you to just pair up with someone next to you and just briefly discuss, is there anything strange in this passage about our understanding of the Christian Sabbath? Any new discovery? Anything unique in the New Testament? Just feel free to pair up and share with one another anything that stands out. Okay. What are some features that really stand out? Something that you haven't seen before. Huh?
Ceased from his rest.
Cease. Say that one more. Cease from the work. Okay. Anything else? Verse 8. What does it say in verse 8?
If Joshua has succeeded, then God doesn't need to do.
Okay. What else do you see?
It's a praise. It's a praise, not a date.
Mm-hmm. That's right. It's not about a day. Huh? What else do you see? Yeah, isn't that strange? It says strive to enter into this rest. I'll get to that in a minute. Anything else?
The rest seems to be more rooted in the gospel.
Mm-hmm.
Faith.
Yes. Yeah. Takes a lot of faith, actually, to be able to cease from work, because that's not how we're conditioned or trained. There are three unique features in this passage that I kind of really wrestle with. Number one, most of us, it seems like the Hebrews writer is actually talking about this ultimate Sabbath is our future reality, right? It says in verse 1, since the promise of entering the Sabbath or rest still stands, meaning that it's not yet. But then he goes on to say, let us be careful that none of you be found to have fallen short of it. It sounds very contradictory. On the surface, it seems like he's talking about this eternal rest that is coming, whether entering into God's presence or this eternal rest. So oftentimes we use this passage in funeral services, right? It's a very popular passage, the Sabbath rest. The so-and-so has entered the rest. But what he's saying is actually radically different. I love one of the translations that I found. It's the first revision of the Passion Translation. It says in this way. Let me see if I can pull that up. If you go to the Passion Translation, in verse 1, it says, you can listen. Now, God has offered to us the same promise of entering into His realm of resting in confident faith. so that we must be extremely careful to ensure that we all embrace the fullness of that promise and not fail to experience it. This is probably just about the best translation I found, because he's talking about not just a rest as an activity, but he talks about the realm of God's resting. There's this unknown realm that we must enter into. That's why he uses a word. Usually we use the verb take rest, right? We take rest. We don't enter into rest. But there's this realm of resting that God is in. And it takes faith, confident faith, for us to really enter into that. And then he says that we must be extremely careful to embrace the fullness of this promise. So it is a future promise, that promise is also available to us today, and we should not fail to experience it. Meaning that it is a present reality. It is a present reality. The fullness of it can be experienced today, and we can enter into this realm of God's resting. So that's the first feature. The second feature, if you look at verse 3, that it says that this is actually verse 9. This rest that we're talking about is exclusive to the people of God. Right? Most of us think that Sabbath is about ceasing from work and taking a break, or opening a bottle of wine, sitting on the beach, just enjoying the tranquility and peace. That's how we understand this Sabbath rest. But verse 9 says, there remains a Sabbath rest for the people of God. Meaning that there's no Sabbath for those people that are outside of the kingdom. So it's something that is a very exclusive to the people of God. We know that every generation, every culture, and every society understands the value of resting. That's why we take vacation, right? How many of you feel rested after you take vacation? Oftentimes when we come back from vacation, we have to take another vacation to recover from our vacation. And if you have children, Douglas, is it truly a vacation? It's more work than anything that we normally do. So by the time we go back, we're just exhausted. This is not what this passage is actually talking about, because God says it's a special privilege given only to the people of God. Number 3, the third feature that we see, again, somebody mentioned it, but it says it takes work to enter this rest. What a paradox. Another translation says strive. It says, verse 11 says, make every effort or strive to enter this rest. That's already stressful to me. I hate that word strive. How do you strive to enter this rest? And yet that's what it says. What it means is that it is actually very, very difficult to enter into this realm of God's resting, because there is a war waging against our soul to make sure that we do not get there. We do not live from this place of Sabbath. Basically what it's saying is that this is probably going to be the greatest battleground of your spiritual warfare. More than anything else that you're going to have to face. The enemy is going to fight against our flesh and soul, that we do not learn how to live from this place. So what is this Sabbath? What is this realm of God's resting that this Hebrews writer is talking about? And again, I'll begin with what it is not. So as somebody already said, our understanding of Sabbath is a day. For average people, it's Sunday, right? That's what we call Sabbath day. And we want people to come to our church and listen to our preaching and go home and be rested. What about pastors, right? When do you take your Sabbath? Oftentimes it's our Monday, right? You know, I want to tell you that when this crisis, this anxiety and panic attack began to happen in my life, I was actually really good at keeping my Sabbath. I was disciplined. I had friends who make sure that I don't overwork. And on Mondays, I normally don't take phone calls. I don't look at emails. I stay away from. And I was really diligent in keeping this Sabbath practice all throughout my pastoral ministry life. And yet, I still experience this anxiety and fear. The reason why we miss the meaning of the true Sabbath, when Hebrews writer is actually talking about this day, this is the Old Testament understanding of the Sabbath, but it's not just a day of the week that he's talking about. Secondly, what it's not is that most oftentimes we understand Sabbath as ceasing from labor, ceasing from work. If you look at all the Old Testament practices, they were very, very strict, right? In the Old Testament, to the Jews, it was actually about abstinence from work. Why? Because it took a lot of faith to trust in God. So in the Old Testament understanding, Sabbath is all about ceasing from anything that has to do with subsistence. Meaning you cannot hunt, you cannot harvest. So all the rabbis, they used to teach about the Sabbath, and one of the things, they even added more than what was in the Bible. So it's actually quite funny to read about some of these old practices of Sabbath. You're not supposed to kill a flea on the Sabbath day. Why is that? Because it's considered hunting. You're not supposed to pluck a gray hair. Why is that? Because it's considered harvesting. It's funny. You're not supposed to eat an egg that was laid on the Sabbath day. Why? Because it's sinful egg. It was an egg that was conceived out of sin on Sabbath day. And so, do you realize how absurd, how far they went? Even in our recent American history, when you look at how the Puritans actually used to observe the Sabbath day, the only toy that you were allowed to play on Sunday was Noah's Ark. The only book that you were allowed to read on Sunday was, besides the Bible, was Pilgrim's Progress. They were not supposed to laugh. Can you imagine coming to church on Sunday? And laughing was considered work. So this is all out of good intention that people really wanted to honor God's command, and they kept to the every little letter of the law, and yet we miss the true meaning of the Sabbath because we focus so much on what or when, and we miss the point of why. Why did God want His people to observe the Sabbath? And that's really what we want to talk about today. We don't really hear about the Sabbath practice until the Ten Commandments, right? In Exodus chapter 20. You shall work 6 days. That's part of the command, actually. We're supposed to work 6 days. And then you will observe the Sabbath day. But God does not really explain to us why He wanted us to really observe this command until Exodus chapter 31. I think I have that passage somewhere here. Let's go to Exodus 31. It says, God is speaking to Moses, "You're to speak to the people of Israel. Above all, you shall keep my Sabbath, for this is a sign between you and me for generations to come." So this is not just for the Israelites or those who came out of Egypt. For generations to come, that you may know that I, the Lord, sanctify you. See, under the Mosaic covenant, this was a sign. What is a sign? Sign is not the real thing. Sign is always pointing to a greater reality. So when you go to Disneyland, you see the sign. It says Disneyland. Welcome to Disneyland, right? Can you imagine packing your minivan and taking your kids to drive all the way to Orlando, and you get to the sign that says Disneyland, and you start unpacking your car and you pitch a tent there, and then you just stay there for the next 6-7 days? You know how absurd that will be? But that's actually what most people do. God says that it's a sign. Sign is pointing to a real. The whole point of getting to that point or place is to really enter into the real Disneyland. There's a reality that this sign is actually pointing to. So when God says that this is a sign between you and me, it's not the real thing. The reason why we abstain from work or we set aside one full 24-hour period unto God is a sign that points to this divine reality that He's inviting us into. And yet, most people end up just staying under that sign for the next 7 days, thinking that that's the real thing. The purpose of the Sabbath day, God says, is so that you will know that I sanctify you. That's a really important word for us, right? Jesus is our sanctifier. This is one of our pillars of our core beliefs as the Alliance family. And oftentimes I talk about this word sanctification, and very few people, or I'm not claiming that I have a better or deeper understanding, but most of us, our understanding, average Christians, church-going Christians, their understanding of sanctification is working hard to become a better Christian, a better believer. And that has a purpose. There's good in it. But that's not really what it means to be sanctified. Those people who have a little better understanding will say that it means to be set apart unto God. And yet that's a beautiful meaning. But I think when God talks about sanctification, it goes even further. The best definition that I've discovered in my own walk, in my own journey about sanctification, when God says, I sanctify you, what it means is that I elevate you. Those of you who are going through your ordination process, I don't know if you can use this as a definition or not. You may not pass if you use this. But let me just give you, in my own life, this is how I have come to understand what it means to be sanctified. Why is God giving this Sabbath as a sign to the Israelites? Who were they? Where did they come from? They were a bunch of slaves in the land of Egypt. They knew no freedom. They knew what it means to rest at all. For them to cease from work is what? Is rebellion. So when God says that you are now to enter into this rest, or this is going to be a sign, He's not just talking about 24-hour activity that we abstain from our work, but it's really talking about our identity. You were once slaves, and now I elevate you as my people. Once they were unworthy, common, and now He's saying that you're my prized possession. You were unrighteous people who do not deserve my grace, and yet now I'm calling you righteous. You were once slaves in the land, foreign land, and now I'm calling you my sons and daughters. And this is really the reality that God wants us to experience, is to elevate us from unsacred to sacred, unholy to holy. And what God is saying is that this rest, this realm of resting, is exclusive to myself. And I am now inviting you into it. Who gets to rest? Rest is a privilege, right? If you're slaves, you don't really get to rest. How many of you really your life is just a series of rest? Only God can do that. Only God can enjoy His own work and celebrate. And yet, now God is saying that this is a sign between you and me, that you are no longer slaves. And this is a sign that now you get to cease from work. And no one's going to come after you. I'm going to break this yoke that has been upon you. That's what it says actually in Leviticus chapter 26, when He explains the meaning of the Sabbath. So what is Sabbath? The best definition that I can give to you is really, this is God's invitation for us to live out of God's resource as His sons and daughters. This is really the very essence of the gospel that we're supposed to proclaim, to preach. I want you to think about when you become anxious. When do you experience anxiety in your life? Chuck, you don't seem anxious at all. Do you ever get anxious? When do you get anxious?
When it's been really
Yeah. Sometimes it can be the amount of work that we do, but it's really the state of our heart. It's not the amount of physical exhaustion, or it's when we think that we're running out of resource. Yeah, time, money, health. That's when anxiety actually begins to surge. So, I really believe that anxiety is really a sign that we are living out of our own resource. And that's how most people live in this world. You have to come up with your own resource for your own life. That's slavery. And yet, God is inviting us that you no longer have to live out of your own resource, because the end of that life is anxiety, fear, panic. And yet, God says that you can live out of my resource, which is an amazing promise that God gives to us. A very famous passage that we all know, when we think of the gospel, we always go to Luke chapter 15, right? The story of the prodigal son. And we focus on how this wayward son comes back, repents, and be reinstated. But what we often forget in that whole story is what God actually wants to restore to us when we return to Him. Three things that the Father bestows upon this son who returned. Remember what those three things were? They're not just symbol or just a figure of speech. Specifically, Jesus says that the Father restores three things. One, what is it? Robe. The best robe. What's the second thing that He restores? The ring. And then the Father puts sandals on His feet. Now, if I were the Father, I would at least have him take a shower, right? He throws his arms and He kisses him as he is, and then He puts on the best robe in the house, and the ring, which is probably the signet ring that he has, and the sandals. Do you realize what these three things really represent? I've really had to learn to experience these three things that's been restored unto me. This robe is the robe of honor. So many of us, we struggle with shame. We can put on a nice face and show up and put a smile and pretend that everything is okay. But the deepest problem that humanity faces is really our sense of shame, because all of us struggle with just a sense of falling short. Some of the things that we've done in the past that we don't want anybody to find out. God says, I'm going to restore my honor upon you. Doesn't matter where you have been, what you have done in the past, what secrets that you carry. The blood of Jesus can actually wash us away from all those things. But the problem is that most of us do not really fully experience that. We do not fully enter into that realm of God's forgiveness and freedom that He wants to give to us. What does the ring signify? Sonship. It's authority. It's the authority. Signet ring, it usually has the family emblem on it, and you carry that ring, you belong to the family. It really signifies the spiritual authority that God wants to actually give to us over darkness, over the enemy, over the brokenness of this world. And the question is, how many of us really know how to access that and live out from that place? And then the Father puts sandals on the feet of this son. In the old days, if you read some of the ancient literature and documents, slaves actually don't wear shoes. Why is that? Because the masters want to keep their feet dirty so that it limits their access to where they can go. So when the Father puts on the sandals, basically Father is giving back the access that you can go anywhere. Do you know when I talked about Jenna last night, right? This kid who used to come over to our house. Do you know when my daughter's friends come over to hang out at our place, do you know how you tell that which one belongs to the house and which one is a guest? Yeah. Well, more than that, guests will dare to walk into our bedroom. If you're a guest at somebody's house, you can only go to living room or guest room or family room, you do not have access to the sacred place or the secret places of the house. When you have those sandals, basically God is saying you can enter into any places. And that's really what the Father is restoring. And yet, so many people do not know. They just stay at the entryway. Or if you go a little further, that's just living room. John 1:12. Again, when we talk about the gospel, and this is the theme of this conference, most people understand the gospel as John 3:16. I love John 3:16. But that's really not the gospel. It's what we have made the gospel out of is just based on John 3:16. It's all about our eternal life, all about going to heaven. That's not the gospel. The real gospel that we find is actually comes from John chapter 1:12. All those who have received him, who believed in his name, he gave the right to become his children. That word, right, is a mistranslation. If you've studied Greek, it's the same word that is used. It's the word exousia. It's not the right word to use for that context, and yet John is saying that you have the exousia, which is the same word that is used when Jesus says, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given unto me. So just imagine what the gospel is promising is that you have this all authority that was given to Jesus that is also your authority. It's the power. It's the authority to become the sons and daughters of God. That's very different from just the right to become his children. That's the kind of access that we actually get to have. I want you to think about what Jesus declared when he first came. Matthew chapter 11, verse 28. Do you remember? Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened. And then here's a strange statement once again. I will give you rest. Imagine if I came to you today, oh, you look really tired, Ron. Can I give you some rest? Does that make sense? It's absolutely bizarre to tell somebody that I want to give you rest. So this rest is not about ceasing from work or watching Netflix, drinking a glass of wine. I want you to understand how shallow our understanding of the Sabbath is. That you don't just give rest to somebody. Jesus is promising that I'm going to give you something that no one else can give to you. It's a new identity. It's new authority. It's a new status. I'm going to elevate you to my realm and you can enter in through your faith. When you receive me, that's the kind of access that you get to have. I have so many passages that I can talk about. Jesus says, peace I give to you. How do you give peace to somebody? It's a shalom peace that we're supposed to experience, we're supposed to enter into. And he says that this is very different from how the world gives peace. It's not the kind that you will find anywhere else. And you can only experience this peace through me. This is the kind of peace, or this is the kind of realm that even David got to live. I have so many passages that I can, again, we're out of time, but Psalm 23, for example, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Does he really not have anyone? He's saying that I found a new resource that I have never known. And I have learned to live from that place. When you have that kind of peace, it says, he makes me lie down on green pastures. Sheep do not lie down. Have you ever seen a sheep lie down? What happens when sheep lie down? They die. They are either eaten or they die. And yet, David has discovered a new way of living his life. In the presence of my enemy, he prepares a table for me. Even though I walk through the shadow of the valley of death, I will fear no evil. How do you live like that? Psalm 3 is another passage. When he declares that the Lord is my shield, he is the lifter of my head. Do you know when he wrote that psalm, Psalm 3, is when Absalom, his own son, was coming after him with a massive army. Just imagine your own kids trying to kill you and take your place. How do you declare such a praise? It's impossible. And yet that's the kind of life that we are supposed to live from. And the enemy does not want you to. You figure out how to live from this place, it's game over. I'm going to just end with one story. A few years ago, I went to Rome to see my daughter who was studying there. Sandy and I had a short 4-day visit to Rome. And we were going to Colosseum one day. And there was this one place that I wanted to show my daughter and my wife. This is a hotel that I stayed in 1993 when I was leading a short-term missions team from YWAM. We were on our way to Russia, and we had a full day and a half of layover in Rome, Italy. So what do? We enjoy our little gift, and the problem was that we stayed at this tiny little hotel, beautiful hotel, but we did not have a lot of money. It's one of those missions trips where you just literally have to rely on God's miraculous provision. So we had just enough to get to Russia and just enough to get to come back. And maybe a little extra money. And this is one of those trips where we had to literally pray that God will send somebody to take us in, welcome us. It's like the New Testament. No money back, no sandals. It's one of those trips. So imagine we got to Rome. And there were 7 of us. And I was a team leader at the time. So I had to think about our finance. The problem is that there's this restaurant on the bottom floor, and every time we come out of our room and we pass by that restaurant, it's just pasta and pizza and bread, and you can smell there's just a fresh bakery, and we're trying to save our money, so we would just go out and buy a loaf of bread and that butter cheese or whatever, the chocolate cheese. And that's what we were living on. And for a day and a half, we were doing this. And then on the last day when we were heading out to the airport, I just broke down. I said, I don't care if we have enough money or not. We're just going to feast before we get to Russia. So we went into the restaurant. We sat down and we were ready to order. We opened the menu. And at the top of the menu, I'll still never forget what was at the top of the menu. In English, plain English. Do you know what I saw? It's 4 words sentence. Guests eat for free. For almost a day and a half, we starved. We did not know that we had access to all this amazing pasta, pizza, salad, and olives. And we realized, and can you imagine just the gnashing of teeth that was going on at the moment? All my teammates were angry. I was angry. So we feasted. We just stuffed ourselves. We can laugh about this, but do you realize that this is really the reality that most Christians live with? We have no idea what God has actually offered to us. We don't know how to access the authority that Jesus has. And we live like slaves. When God declares that sons and daughters eat for free, we live like slaves. This is really the heart cry of the Father. When the elder son in that story, Luke chapter 15, it says that I've been slaving for you all my life, and you did not give me a single goat to celebrate with my friend. And when this son of yours returns, you kill a fattened calf and throw a party. And do you know what the father said? He was probably in tears. He says, son, all I have is yours. All I have is yours. I believe that this is really the heart cry of the Father towards the church today. So many Christians live like that elder son, trying to measure up, trying to slave our way. When God says that all I have is yours, he did not even know how to celebrate with his friend, what access he had. This is the rest that God wants to really give to us. If we begin to understand the kind of access and authority, power that God has actually given to us through Christ, the outcome of our lives will be very, very different. And yet, because we don't know what resources we have, that we still live like slaves. Now, disclaimer. This takes a lot of work. It takes every effort against our own flesh and our soul. I'm learning how to do this. I'm not saying that this is something that we figure out one day and we begin to kind of live from this place of rest. It'll take probably the rest of our lifetime to really learn how to live from that kind of authority and access. And yet, this is the hunger that God wants to restore in us. This has been my desire in my life, Lord. Every day, every morning when I wake up, my prayer is that, Lord, teach me how to live as your son. How to have this kind of authority, how to access the authority of Jesus over darkness, over brokenness, how to pray for people, how to minister to people out of your strength and your resource, not the little that I have. Lord, multiply so that I can give it away. Friends, what this world needs in this moment is not more skilled or more trained leaders. We have enough of that. What we need and what the world needs is the rested leaders who know how to access that fullness, the abundance, the realm of God's resting. Imagine if we learn how to live from that place and how to minister, how to pastor people, how to evangelize people, how to pray for people. It'll be game over. As I said, it'll be an unstoppable movement. And that's actually what we see in the book of Acts. That's what we see happen to these disciples who receive the provision of God's power and strength. And that's the heart of God. And that's the invitation that goes out to each one of us today. Will you go after that with me? Calvin, can you just lead us in a time? I want to just give you a moment I think we have a little time. I want you to just think about where all of us, we go through seasons of anxiety. But what's the greatest source of your anxiety right now? Where do you feel like your resources running out? That you have to come up with something. Those are the very areas that God really wants to show you and provide for you. What are your fears, greatest fears right now? What's causing you panic or sleeplessness at night? The Lord wants to lift your head, be your shield. I want you to just think about just a few of those areas, and then if you can just get into groups of 3 or 4, let's just end our time today really praying for one another. That God will meet us there. God will teach us how to access the resources that we have yet to discover. Those areas that He wants us to live from His resources. Can we do that? Okay. Let's just take a moment individually, just for a few moments. Let God really speak to you and reveal some of those areas. And then in about a few minutes, I'm just going to ask you to get into groups of 3 or so and really pray for one another, and then we'll end our time.